Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with the founder and CEO of Akesa Health, Lesaicherre. She is the founder of this healthcare company, a startup offering a self-guided therapy app, helping people transform anxiety and distress into resilience. She is a global entrepreneurial executive with 18 years experience launching tech businesses for General Electric and startups in the U.S., Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. She holds a PhD in chemical biology from the National University of Singapore and an executive MBA from the Columbia Business School and London Business School. She spent 20 years getting degrees, climbing the corporate ladder worldwide, and running away from a long-forgotten childhood trauma. We cover all of this and so much more. Enjoy.
Thank you again for taking a minute out today. And I want to begin our conversation before we get into your life in business and therapy to talk about COVID. How did you survive COVID, and how did that time period change the way that you approach your life now?
So I survived COVID relatively okay. I would say, it was hard like for everybody else, but I am, I think, on the fortunate side. I live outside of San Francisco, and I had access to nature, so I could get out of the house a little bit. And I used this time to do a lot of research and launch a new business. So it was actually a very productive time on my side. And it has changed me in making me realize the importance of life, and that, we can make a lot of predictions in life, but COVID has showed us that there is very little we can predict, actually.
So to get a handle on your life and what you do, I'm going to take you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of them looks up and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I am an entrepreneur. I have a knack for finding problems and things that need to be fixed. And I create products to fix those, and I sell them.
So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream job when you grew up?
I am not sure I actually had a dream job, but I always loved to solve problems and ask a lot of questions, which drove everybody crazy. So I think I knew I wanted to be doing something close to science. And I think it was the seed of becoming an entrepreneur, actually.
So you've done a lot of travel. You've done a lot in the world, in business. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and what traveling around the world and seeing different cultures has done for the way that, you approach business and the way that you even have gone after therapy and your new app.
So very briefly about the travel, I grew up in France, and then I left France when I was 21, spent some time in Asia, then was in the U.S. the first time, and then in Africa, the Middle East, and back in the U.S. And all of this has taught me that, first of all, with regards to business, we have different ways of doing business. The U.S. is usually very pragmatic, and in Asia it takes more time, and relationships are often a lot more important. But underneath all of this, I think human beings all over the world are actually a lot more similar than we sometimes think. We all seek, safety and work that is meaningful and relationships that are loving and nurturing.
Talk to me a little bit about exactly how you arrived at this juncture in your life to develop this app and to make mental health and therapy a priority.
So I grew up in a family in France that unfortunately suffered a lot of trauma. Some of it I knew, and some of it I discovered later on. My mother died when I was very young, and my brother and some other people, and they were the suicides. But I grew up in a family where I was told, you were young, you don't remember anything, it has no impact on you, and therapy is for losers anyway. And for pretty much 25 years of my life, this is what I believe, because this is what everybody else told me. Until about 10 years ago, everything came back crashing, and what we bury eventually always resurface. And I realized I suffered from PTSD, and I got very frustrated with the lack of affordable and scientifically validated solutions. It was difficult to find therapists I could work with, and it was very long, very expensive. So a few years ago, eventually I was out of the woods and I started doing a lot of research, and I realized that the brain has an innate self-healing potential. And so I created Akesa, an app that helps people tap into the brain self-healing potential to stop transforming anxiety and distress and small trauma into resilience, the ability to face life's setbacks.
So speaking of healing the brain, from your perspective, when you do experience trauma early on, do you ever get to the point where you fully heal your brain, or is therapy an ongoing thing? How do you think that works?
I believe personally that at some point we heal and we move on. I don't think, some people would say we bounce back, and I don't think you are ever the person you used to be prior to the trauma. If you compare it to, you have a cut on your skin, right? At some point, the skin will heal, but you always have this little scar, right? But let me give you an example. So my mother died when I was 18 and 18 months old. I couldn't talk about it because we never talked about it. So it was completely unprocessed. And in my 20s, one day someone asked me about my mother, and I just started crying. I mean, for God's sake, I was getting a PhD. I was highly functioning. But I couldn't even talk about it because all the emotions were all jumbled. And so right now, I can dissociate the facts from the emotions, and I can say clearly, my mother died of brain cancer when I was 18 months old. I don't have all this emotional jumble that comes and hijack my brain anymore. This is where I think we've healed. We're able to move beyond what happened in the past.
So the one thing that's good for the brain is to have role models or people that we look up to in our lives. Who's that for you? Who's the hero or a role model for you?
So there were many heroes. I think from a business point of view, Steve Jobs is definitely a hero for his ability to develop innovative products and really understand what users, need and want. I think when I look at mental health and well-being, the Stoics, the Greek Stoics, so, that's really, really, really old. But they are models, their ability to face life issues head on. Reading the Stoics has helped me a lot.
So I'm going to take that a step further and ask you, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet, who would you love to meet?
Alive.
We can. It can be anybody in the history, whether they're alive or not.
So there are a lot of very famous people I would love to meet, but I'm going to pick someone much closer, actually. I would love to meet my mother, whom I never knew because I was told afterwards she was really smart and she didn't get a chance to finish high school. She was also very entrepreneurial and very creative, always designing things. So I would love to meet her and get to know her.
So the one thing about life is that we accumulate wisdom over time, and I'm curious, if you have a dream tonight, run into your younger version in your 20s, and you could impart some wisdom, advice on your younger self, what would it be based on what you've learned throughout your life?
I would say focus a little bit more on relationships. I think when we are young, when I was young, I was very focused on my career and driven, and it is important. But I think at the end of our life, when we reflect back, and I'm not there yet, but as we grow older and we reflect back, our career has been important and what we've achieved is important, but relationships and the time we've spent and invested with loved ones is actually very, very important too. So I would have spent more time on this.
Now that we're coming out of COVID, we've all, the topic of mental health is really huge. It seems like a really opportune time to have an app out. What are your expectations for it now that the world probably needs this more than ever?
So the vision I have for Akesa is to the iOS version is already developed, so develop the Android version and have it scientifically validated and really affordable and translated in other languages as well, because the Spanish-speaking population in the U.S. has even a lower access to mental health care, and then translating it in other languages and rolling it out overseas.
Everyone out there has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, consumers, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
So I'm going to give you a very spiritual answer to this. I think we need to look underneath the appearance and the name and the nationality and all of this and the career. And from a spiritual point of view, I would say I'm a spiritual being of divine intelligence, love, and power.
Marie, if anybody wants to get the app, learn more about you, anything related to you and your world and what you do, where can they go?
So the best place to go to is the website, so www.Akesa Health, AKESA Health.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. This is the best way to find me. Otherwise, they can email me directly at Marie, M-A-R-I-E, at akesahealth.com. And if anybody has, questions or mental health topics they would like to discuss, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Marie, thank you. Happy holidays. Have a great 2023. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Same to you, Joe. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend, too.
Thanks again for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, and music from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube and on Spotify. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.